Kaicho Radio, the radio with a difference.
Looking for a new job opportunity? Let Strategic Recruitment Solutions Inc. help you maximize your potential. Visit them at 230 Camp Street, Laceytown, Georgetown, obliquely opposite the New Citizens Bank. Strategic Recruitment Solutions. New ideas, better HR.
Good evening, it is 19 hours 30 and it is time to enter room 592 this evening. At the helm of the program, as usual, is Dr. Yog Mahadeo and senior journalist of Kaicho News, Leonard Gildarie. And this evening, they have a special guest, former Vice President, Mr. Hamilton Green. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening to you, Mr. Kevin Smith. How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
Fine, thank you.
All right. Good evening to you, Leonard, and good evening to you, former mayor, former vice president, former prime minister, sir. It's a pleasure to have you tonight in room 592, sir.
My pleasure.
All right. To our viewers and listeners out there, welcome to this room 592, where we unleash the truth in our discussions Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, except for this election season. We're on every weeknight. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have the pleasure, the honor of having former mayor, former prime minister, former vice president of Guyana, Mr. Hamilton Green. Mr. Hamilton Green, ladies and gentlemen, would have certainly been in this world and have a lot of experience than many of us who are joining this show, who are talking to him tonight. And of course, his experience will bear a lot of fruits and insight into not just the past, not just our history, but into understanding what's the status quo of governance in Guyana presently and why things are where and how they are. To you, sir, Mr. Green, I have known you for quite a while. I've always had a lot of respect for you, sir. You and I have had a lot of dialogues and discourses in the past. And sir, I must say it was a pleasure to call you yesterday and to hear your very healthy and good voice, and not to say the least. And I say that out of respect to hear the lovely voice of Dr. Jennifer Basdeo Green as well, sir. You are one lucky man, aren't you?
Tell me that. Absolutely lucky.
So how have you been, sir?
Not bad. As I said, the wife has returned to Ghana permanently, and both in her spousal position and her medical competence, she's taking good care of the old man.
Okay. Well, that's a new one for Mr. Green to admit he's an older man. It's a new one, right?
It's a term of art.
Okay. Well, there you go. Thank you.
So let's chronological.
Of course. So, sir, let's get right into our discussion. You would have seen what's happening in Guyana's politics today. And I want to put it right to you. What's your view with the status quo? And we're talking specifically about elections 2020 with the recount going on. How do you feel about Mingo's declaration? How do you feel about the recount and where we are today, sir?
Well, the recount is on its way. Mm-hmm. I don't have any information to make a comment on Mingo's purported declaration, except that my position is let's wait and see what the recount says. We've got to be very careful in Guyana not to be victims of one side enthusiasm, or if you prefer, propaganda on one side or the other. Mm-hmm. The present
Right.
situation in Guyana is a consequence of our history. And we would have thought that 100 years after the end of this First World War or the First European Civil War, as an ex-colony, we would have learned how to work and live together. And if I may jump the gun, the answer to put an end to this confusion, this odd situation, which really has put the people of Guyana in a very, very vulnerable position. Vulnerable to the wiles and machinations of the powerful, what we call the first world, the people who have never relinquished their imperialist attitudes and philosophy. And I had hoped after the work of Dr. Chedi Jagan and Forbes Burnham, after the Waddington Constitution in 1953, we ought to have learned that we have to work together.
Right.
And that so long as there is this divide, this ugliness, the young people, my descendants, will not be the beneficiaries of our God-given bounty.
Well said. Well said, sir. And you know, Mr. Green, you have yourself been an example of working together. If we don't have to go too far back in the past. You have worked with Mr. Burnham, and in later years, when you become the mayor of Georgetown, sir, you also you earned the support of the PPP to get you to the position of mayor. Am I wrong, sir?
Oh, you're not right.
Okay. Well, correct me then.
At the local government elections held in 1994, that is after I had the spat with Mr. Hoyt, who purportedly expelled me from the party, which I helped to make.
Right.
We had local government elections. I had formed my group, the Good and Green Georgetown. There were 30 seats. My group got 12 seats. The PNC under Hoyt got 10. And the PPP under Dr. Jagan got 8 seats. When the elections for the position of mayor came, the PNC and the PP couldn't agree, and therefore my 12 votes prevailed, and that is how I became mayor. So it is therefore any of the two Leviathans. It was my own, the fact that I was very popular in Georgetown, and I was able to defeat the PNC in what they considered then their stronghold.
Interesting. And sir, I want to quickly bring you right back to the current elections, because everything fits together, as you would tell me that, you know, you cannot ignore history, as you just said earlier too. But sir, coming right back to what we have prevailing now, given your years of experience, here is, as you rightly said, don't bother with one side or the other, but here is the problem. The SOPs, the APNU AFC is currently still saying, notwithstanding the recount, you should swear in the incumbent, use the declaration of Mingo and swear in. Whereas the opposition is saying, no, let us get the recount completed. Where would you make that call, sir, in terms of right or wrong, or the way forward on that?
It's neither right nor wrong. The two leaders agreed that there should be a recount. The GECOM has settled the details of and the characteristic of that recount, and that is where we are. I think the question of swearing in a president has now become OTOs and not relevant to the present process. Today I learned they're trying to speed up the process because from the very beginning, and I gave my advice in the appropriate quarters, if we need to get the truth of these elections, very important, we said it was the mother of all elections, we cannot just open boxes and count the votes. I've been involved in elections since 1953 as a teenager, active, working. And elections is not the business of Sunday school teachers nor Sisters of Mercy. particularly when the stakes are high. And what we have seen so far is that one side quite properly exploited the weakness in the system and the fact that we went to elections 2020 with a bloated list. And that is the genesis of the problems. Once you have a bloated list, smart political activists try to make use of that condition. And we have seen from reports so far, people who are dead have come alive and voted and they've returned to their graves. People who were outside of Guyana and therefore not entitled under the new law to vote, voted. So something is fundamentally wrong. And I hope that this recount gets to the bottom of it. But after that, I beg, pray, and plead. Our leaders have to talk to find a modus vivendi.
Yes.
We cannot bequeath to our children a divided country that will not progress, will not be able to make optimum use of our resources.
Correct.
And this is my worry, my great...
Yeah, well said. Well said, sir. Because the truth is that having it is widely felt, and I share your view there that, you know what, and Leonard, having the end of the recount is not the solution. I mean, the end of the recount will see one side swearing, one side being the winner and the other side being the loser, and we are back in the cycle again. But Mr. Green, do you think that the current set of leaders, on one side you have Jagdeo and his team, the other side you have Mr. Joe Harmon and Mr. Granger and them all, do you think that these two camps have people within them that can have dialogue?
I've made a very brief foray for them to talk. Both sides seem, on the face of it, willing to talk. Whether those talks should be deep, incisive, and conclusive is, of course, another matter. If we're speaking of re-engineering a constitution, then that may be something that can be worked out by our legal luminaries. But for me, the next stage, if we are to be the beneficiaries, need to go beyond constitutions and rules. You need to have a metamorphosis in terms of attitudes so that those who talk about democracy must know what it really means. It's one of those chameleon words that mean different things to different people. We need to have a situation where our new crop of leaders are genuinely interested in being super patriots and doing what is good, not for personal benefit, aggrandizement, corruption, and narco state, but doing what is good for the children of this country so that, to repeat myself, they can be the beneficiaries of God-given resources, gold, timber, diamonds, now oil, rich agricultural lands. Right. We ought not to have any vestige of poverty, but we haven't reached that stage as yet. But our leaders have got to talk. They've got to be disciplined. They've got to be humble so that we can begin from a position that no one has a monopoly of ideas, competence, and the way forward.
Well said, sir. But here's one thing I want to probably ask you for your comment again. So, for example, Mr. Granger and Mr. Jagdeo, they got together and they made they had an agreement to bring CARICOM. But notwithstanding Mr. Granger and Mr. Jagdeo having that agreement, yet there would have been persons within the list of within the membership of one side of Mr. Granger's own party, that would have sought court action to stop that agreement and deem it null and void. So isn't there, sir, blindness in such a hope then that even if some of the leaders exhibit such a dispensation to heal, that maybe all is not well in the two parties, in the two camps?
The vicissitudes of political fortune. We have reached a grand place, which I don't support, where people have an idea that they have certain absolute rights within a group to do as they think fit. It's something that we need to deal with a little later on, because no society can progress unless there's a level of discipline and orderliness within the group. We have lost that culture for a number of reasons. That is why you see on one side some leaders promoting people who they feel are pliable and will do their biddings. You know, it's an unhappy set of conditions.
So, Mr. Green, you are, of course, you have been conferred with one of the highest, if not the highest, order of Roraima, sir. You have had a lifetime of experience in the Guyana political landscape, and not so much, well, in addition to that, of course, the mayorship of Georgetown. How do you feel, sir, with regards to, and again, I'm bringing you back to what's happening current day, with regards to the political landscape, where one set of people would be harping that we don't need foreign observers, we are a sovereign state, these foreigners should stay out. Today we have an instance where the Carter Center has not been allowed to come into the country. What's your personal political and sage-worthy stand on foreigners overlooking and overseeing our elections, sir?
Well, first of all, I don't use the term the Carter Center was not allowed. I don't have all the details. But I have very straight views on this question. Yes, CARICOM, we became independent in 1966. We formed part of a group called CARICOM from the old West Indies. And here you must give credit to the three great big Bs. When Burnham, Barrow, and Byrd met at Dickinson Bay and initiated the idea that, look, we must work together, put ourselves on the world stage, and show that we respect each other and that we be guided by the general counsels that emanate from the group. In those circumstances, I have no difficulty with the CARICOM group. You mentioned the Carter group. Let me say there are three comments I'd like to make about the Carter group. And forgive me if their first two are personal.
Sure.
I was weaned by a woman, my mother, who lived 20 years in the United States during the heydays of the 20s and the early 30s. I grew up almost every day being breastfed, if I can use that term, by the horrors she experienced in the deep South in the United States. So I admit I am biased. I have a difficulty with people who come from the South of the United States. Second, we must remember that when Jimmy Carter's group came here in 1992, I tried to persuade Mr. Hoyt that the way forward was to talk with Dr. Jagan to make changes to our electoral system, if that was necessary, so we can go forward. That did not fly, and I am satisfied because I have the evidence that the Carter Center, coming with the philosophy of regime change, did not see a fair elections in 1992. I have on umpteen times, and my wife is a witness to this incident, at the elections at the school here in Lodge, when we voted, 3 persons approached me saying that their names did not appear on the list. Remember, those lists were given out in many areas between 5 and 6 in the morning. When I checked with the GECOM, it was confirmed that persons were deliberately left off that list given to the poll clerk to use. They dispatched Mr. Stanley Singh, the Deputy Chief Elections Officer, who looked at the situation, recognized that something was very wrong, took the list that was posted in the school for several weeks, where the names of those 3 persons could be found. But the poll clerk said they had very strict instructions to use only the lists given to them. And I believe at the behest or influence of the Carter Center. My third, therefore I have a bias from my own personal experience.
Yes.
The third point I want to make is that, and I said this to Mr. Carter when I met him some years after our elections. The Carter Center is housed, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, a place where they still practice what the Americans call voter restriction. Voter suppression, sorry. And I have not heard a single word from the Carter Center on this American phenomenon, which disallowed Miss Stacey Abrams, very popular, very articulate Afro-American, from being governor of Georgia. So I give you my 3 reasons why I'm apprehensive and have no interest in the Carter Center playing any part in our elections in Guyana. Mind you, these are not the views I got from the PNC. These are the views of Hamilton Green, and I make no apologies.
Understood, sir. Understood. And thank you for those
And
views,
beyond
sir.
that, what I've said is evidence that cannot be contested.
Okay.
I lived with a mother who told me, traveling on a train, and when they crossed the Mason-Dixon line, burly white Americans say, "Niggers, get behind. If you don't, you're in all sorts of trouble."
Right. Mr. Green, I want to ask you this very peculiar question, but it is something that is a question almost in every Guyanese mind.
Questions aren't peculiar. They're exciting. Go ahead.
So, sir, for our 50-odd years of independence, after all of these years, we are still looking at Guyana as if Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese, and so forth and so on. Do you think, given what's happening over the past 5 years, sir, for which you would have been looking on rather than participating, do you think we can have a racial balance? We can have the hope of bringing people together regardless of race, sir?
There are 2 opportunities. One, I mentioned earlier, the leaders of the so-called groups have got to sit and talk and find a modus vivendi, a way of existing together in peace, love, and sharing the bounty of our resources. The second one, which you may find humorous, is if everybody did what I did, marry a woman who's neither Indian nor African, and maybe we can populate Ghana with more Douglas like Dr. Mahadeo. That might solve the problem. That is why, on a serious note, before Debbie Backham died, I was supporting her to get the very top of the People's National Congress. Her mother's Afro-Guyanese, like my wife, and her father, a personal friend of mine, is Indo-Guyanese. Right. But to give a serious answer to your question, we need to teach our history more in our schools, our mosques, our temples, and our churches. Because if we understood the history, the fact that divide and rule was initiated by the imperialists, our young people will grow up with a great appreciation that they have no choice but to put aside all their prejudices and work together, and that what we should aim for, and I hope for the next elections, is not the color of a man's skin, the texture of his hair, but the content of his character.
Right.
And
Mr. Green,
I am not a pessimist. I'm still hoping.
Right.
that that day will come very soon.
I wanna just come back to you on the Carter question a little bit, because what I gather is that because of your personal experiences and so forth, I understand the reservations with regard to that center. But in the political landscape, in the political balance of things, it is the same Carter Center that would have been instrumental, for the lack of a better word, in getting the coalition in office in 2015. And it is, given modern, more recent history then, it is strange that the coalition sees, has such a strong view about that same center, sir.
I don't know where that theory has come from.
Mm-hmm.
I've been around, and I don't know the Carter Center was instrumental in putting the coalition in office. If that is the case, it raises another worrying question.
Mm-hmm.
Why should a foreign entity be able to influence the outcome of our national election? That worries me. I mean, between 1946, 47, during the height of the Cold War, one can understand that. But thanks to Gorbachev, the Cold War came to an end in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And I see no reason for Guyanese to believe or to be told that some center put a particular group in office. I doubt it, and somebody has to present the facts to me to convince me that that is in fact so.
Okay.
You know, I've lived long enough to know that the truth is an enabling thing.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur Schopenhauer once said, the truth passes through 3 stages. One, when it is ridiculed. The second stage, and we've seen that in Guyana, when it's the victim of violence. We've seen school buses attacked. And the third stage is when the truth becomes manifest.
Mm-hmm.
We have a situation where we also have some irresponsible leaders. I understand that only yesterday, one leader has accused a member of the GECOM of being not only partial, but of rigging the election. A complete absurdity. Now, we've got to get leaders who are mature and, most of all, responsible.
Right.
So that I don't accept the thesis, unless it's something I don't know, that the Carter Center had anything to do with getting the coalition in office in 2015.
Okay.
I know they got a PNC out of office in 1992.
Yes. Sir, I want to take you over to the the Constitution, and you would have been part of Guyana's first Constitution. I want to take you to the Constitution from the following perspective.
When you say first, hold on. When you say first Constitution,
following independence.
Post-independence.
Yes, yes. So I want to take it to you. I want to take you to it from the following perspective, sir. The winner-take-all politics, should that be something that must be immediately squashed? Do you see a massive change in the way government is structured as a solution for our political future?
Absolutely. Given our history, our present tensions, fears, suspicions, what I've written about is a form of a national front government. Mm-hmm. The rules have to be very, very carefully worked out. You've got to get men and women who accept a certain moral code and type of behavior. Because no matter what you put in a constitution, what matters at the end of the day is the attitude of those who are given the responsibility to lead us. Whether they accept honesty as something that is part of them, whether they accept justice and fair play as a mantra, that's another matter. So we have to begin with our schools, our parents, to ensure that we produce children who have a certain moral grounding. That is the answer to the question.
Indeed. And I must tell you, sir, you would feel happy to know this, that Mr. Gildarie, who is online here with us tonight, he and I have been every day on radio, and many times our guests have included young men and women from all races and all political backgrounds, talking about their skills, talking about what they feel they could contribute together. So we do have a huge potential in our youth, but somehow or the other, we don't find that the youths are being allowed, their foray that probably they deserve. What would you say to as you know, sir, the Constitution has changed to allow or to enforce more women participation in government and in the National Assembly. What would you say to a constitution that will also, or rules that would also want to encourage youth participation? And youth doesn't mean underage, but young people.
I don't think that should be part of a constitution. It should be part of a culture.
Rules, right.
To develop, where young people are given the opportunity, where the environment is such that we can release the creative energies of young people. That is what our leaders must seek to do. Beyond that, of course, and again, I'm prejudiced, many of our young people seek to get to the top of the ladder without having to climb the several rungs, the difficulties. I am prejudiced. I climbed the political ladder by hard work, sometimes 12, 15 hours per day, going to every nook and cranny in this country.
Right.
Some of our young people in both parties feel that they have a right to get up to the top without making that sacrifice on work. Maybe they've seen some of us leave office without a lot of wealth, and they're not taking that chance. I don't know. But we have to develop that culture where there's a sense of genuine nationalism among our young people. We have a lot of bright young people, but they need to be guided. They need to be taken along the road where, to repeat myself, the environment is created so we can release the creative energies of our delightful young people.
Understood. Sir, let me just invite my colleague, Mr. Leonard Gildarie. Leonard, you may have one or two comments or questions for former mayor, former prime minister, former vice president, and of course, Mr. Hamilton Green, OR.
How are you doing, Mr. Green? It's always a pleasure talking to you. And I think you have a stronger voice than myself on yoga, and that's a shame.
Well, as I said, yoga earlier, my wife, who's an experienced medical practitioner, is here, and she's taking good care of me. She gave me a solid breakfast this morning, and I just had a good dinner.
Well, I'm glad that you have a good dinner, because I got some questions for you. Let me ask you, the walkout of diplomats from the Ashman building, is this a new era of diplomacy? I want to ask you your thoughts on that, sir.
Let me be quite frank. From what I've seen and heard, the Canadian High Commission in particular was certainly out of order, and I had hoped by now we get an apology from that good lady. We have enjoyed excellent relations with Canada. In fact, among the big countries, the average Guyanese leaders, certainly from my day, regarded the Canadian government as being most friendly, most generous, and kind. So that her obvious bias is unacceptable, and I don't know whether the government of Canada will deal with it. But she's shown that she is myopic politically, and that is not what we expect of a foreign diplomat.
She has been on a number of programs, including this radio station, but recently I saw a number of programs in which she appeared, and she has denied everything that was written about her or spoken about her with regards to not only the meetings that she is alleged to have barged into at GECOM, but other situations. What would you say to that? She's denied it.
I heard the interview with Enrico Wilford. She didn't deny it, but she sought to soften our intervention, claiming that she was invited by the chairman. But even if that was so, that is not her remit. That is not, she is at best an observer, the representative of a foreign country, and what she did is tantamount to a form of interference. We've had enough of that with the Americans and the Russians and the others. And small countries must protect their sovereignty by speaking out against people who feel that we're still back in the days of slavery and indentureship, and that we can be spoken down to. We may be poor, but I'll tell you something, the average Guyanese are proud. Very proud people.
Going forward, Mr. Green, how do we treat...
May I add something to that?
Sure, sure.
I've had years of experience with US, Canadian, and English diplomats. It's the first time I've seen this kind of behavior. First time. And it's unfortunate.
So, going forward, in terms of our diplomacy, what would you, if you had the possibility of advising the next government, what would you say to them? Especially with regards to the ABC and EU countries.
We've got to maintain what I believe is Granger's policy of friendship, mutual respect, and to seek an economic cooperation where it is feasible, and to ensure that they help us to make optimal use of our natural resources. Independence meant a lot for my generation, and the new crop of leaders must maintain that dignity of an independent state while being willing to work with the ABC or any other country, the Russians, the Chinese. You know, Forbes Barnum was a strong advocate and supporter of the non-aligned movement. And the Cold War is over, and there's no need for us to sit behind the petticoats of any nation. There must be mutual respect. They respect us, we respect them. The normal courtesy should exist. Look, I attended a function at the US ambassador's residence some years ago when the PP representative of the president, I mean, a most vulgar attack on the American government and the ambassador. And the next day when I thought that there should be an apology, the head of the presidential secretary said it's a feral blast. And these are the same people who tell us about sanctions. It is an absurdity. The American government used their clout, their military, not necessarily for political reasons and matters of elections, but what is their self-interest? Grenada, Dominican Republic, Vietnam. Vietnam was, as they say, to put a stop on the spread of communism. That had nothing to do with elections in the country. You're seeing the challenges that are taking place now in Venezuela. My old man told me once, we like grass. When the elephants fight, we get crushed. And we need to have the perspicacity to get out of that bind.
Correct. So, Mr. Green, I want to ask you this because you just made a statement with regards to our relationship and Mr. Granger's penchant to have a good relationship, economic relationship. Sir, do you think that with the current way that the government is managing affairs, that we are going to maintain a good relationship with the international countries, with all the countries and bodies and so forth? There is all this talk about sanctions and all of that, sir.
The word sanctions and the idea is the figment of the imagination of my good friend, Bharat Jagju. There's no evidence that they could be sanctioned. In fact, what has the government done to deserve sanctions? I told you a moment ago, the big might to the United States, and similarly, Russia or the USSR it was then, move into countries not to deal with their internal elections, either economic reasons or strategic reasons. when we had the missile crisis, had nothing to do with elections in Cuba or the United States or anywhere else. It has to do with military and strategic interests. And I don't know that Mr. Trump and Mr. Cameron and those fellas have time to deal with a country with less than 1 million people to apply sanctions. In any case, what will be the nature of the sanctions? We had the drug lords who had a heyday in Guyana. Were there sanctions applied? We had conditions where we are violating all the rules of decency. Were sanctions applied?
But they were, weren't they? I mean, they were former ministers who are now in opposition, who has had their visas revoked. There were personal sanctions applied to members of the last government. They might not want to call it sanctions, but certainly some of the foreign bodies took action against a number of ministers of the past government.
Well, that is a matter that is routine. If a government, particularly the big countries, feel that a particular individual, whether he be minister or not, is not operating in their best interest or is in violation of the code of conduct expected of certain people, they can show their displeasure by withdrawing your visas.
Right.
Now, if you call that sanctions, those are sanctions directed to particular individuals in particular circumstances. Mm-hmm. But what we've been hearing, the rhetoric we've been hearing, there be sanctions applied to Ghana. Does that mean that the people at Albion or Georgetown or Rukmini will suffer? I doubt it very much.
Well, based on the interviews we have had on Kaito Radio with the EU ambassador, right, Leonard, and as well as the US ambassador, they did speak to personal sanctions as the first step.
Nothing wrong with that. If a government minister or official commits some act of discretion, gets involved in drug trade, does things that are inconsistent with the policy and philosophy of United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Europe, then those big countries have the right to exercise personal sanctions. But the rhetoric we've been hearing conveyed the impression that these sanctions will descend like a ton of bricks on all the people of Ghana. Absolute nonsense.
Correct. Well, but Mr. Green, you would be the first to advise me that Yog, sometimes the political parties take a spin, because in 2015, both Mr. Granger and Basil Williams are on record calling on the international bodies to impose sanctions against the PPP if they're not going to, prorogue Parliament and remove themselves from office and so forth. So I guess it goes with the play of the day, doesn't it, sir?
Well, if you want to put it as simple as that, I suppose accept that the references you make, there were some solid reasons. We moved from being considered a narco state to being an ordinary country in less than 2 years. We shifted the goalposts insofar as the freedom that these known drug lords operated.
Thank you. So, Mr. Green, yes, sorry, we are getting to program time, and sir, I want to tell you this: after this elections is done and over with, I would really love to have you back on this program to basically talk about, in post-independence period from 1964 onwards. And I will get in contact with you to talk about it later, sir.
Independence was 1966.
66, sorry. But, sir, I want to quickly ask you this. It might come over as a little bit of a bit of humor, and I mean it to sound like a little bit of humor. How did Mr. Hamilton Green feel when he saw in the airways that there was this ceremony at the gardens calling on on the rise of the Kabaka to come and deliver this election, sir?
I didn't get a question.
There was this ceremony, purported ceremony at the Monument Gardens, not Monument Gardens, the Botanic Gardens, where the monument is, that the ceremony purports to raise or call on the Kabaka to come and deliver this elections. I'm sure you might have had quite a smile when you heard that, sir.
I've heard that. A lot of Guyanese have a spiritual part of them. And some people still believe that the Kabaka has the audacity to come out of that place and seriously, we need his wisdom, his perspicacity, and his guidance at this time. There's no one to replace him so far.
Yo, could I ask him a quick question? Sure. Mr. Green, is not often that we have you here, but I want to ask you quickly, what are some, do you believe there's any achievement by this administration in the last 5 years? Could you give me 5 of them?
Any what?
5?
Achievements, just 5.
First of all, the major achievement was to bring an end to the criminality which saturated our country. If they did nothing else, that is a good credit. Because when you have that situation which we met in 2015, it is like an aggressive rodent eating away at the fabric of our society. And the harm done to our society is unbelievable. Look, you said you want to be light sometimes. I met a young man outside Starbucks Markets a couple of years ago. I was mayor at the time. He had no shoes on. I think he was selling fruits or something. So I said to him, why are you not in school? He said his mother sent him to sell these things to get some things. I said, but didn't your mother tell you how important education is? He said, not really. I asked him the next question, what do you want to do when you become an adult? Yog, he said he wanted to be a bandit. I have witness to this conversation.
Wow.
No, but the serious side of it is he was living on the East Coast where he saw bandits flourishing apparently and giving out gifts to people. That's the same condition we had when we had the 23 years of corruption, that people accepted this as the norm, as a very dangerous situation, very, very dangerous. So to answer your question, if we did nothing else, we have reintroduced some portion of national service. The president has gone into rural communities to get them buses, boats, bicycles, and breakfast, etc.
Right.
And basically, they've tried to re-excite people about the local government system. Very vital if our democracy is to be meaningful. Not having local government elections for so many years, it has not yet caught on to the average person the vital role he or she must play in what we call local democracy.
Right. Well, thank you for that, sir. Leonard, any more questions?
No, that's it. Thank you very much, dear Mr. Hamilton Green.
Mr. Green, thank you so much for being on our program. I have one last question for you, sir, that I'm sure if I were there next to you, you would have probably, laughed, give me a good smile again. And sir, well, 2 questions. One is that we have had Mr. Burnham, Mr. Chetty, Desmond Hoyt, Bharat Jagdeo, Donald Ramatar, and Mr. Granger. Can you tell me your top? Well, yes, but can you tell me your top 3, sir?
Chetty Jagan, Forbes Burnham.
3.
3?
3, yes.
You won't get me in trouble, no? No, you see, if I name Granger, and Granger's doing a good job, because Granger has a number of problems. He is leading a group that itself is not easy. So I would name Granger as the 3rd person. Okay. I got on well with Donald Ramatar and Bharat Jagdeo, but I don't think in terms of a national movement, they're in the league of Jagan, Burnham, and Desmond Hoyt. Those are my personal views.
Okay, sir. Well, Mr. Green, thank you so much for joining us, sir. We are at our program time. We're going to be switching over to Mr. Commissioner Sase Gunraj to give us an election update. But thank you so much. And my final question to you, sir, which I would not want you to answer on air, Leonard and I will come over to you one day when COVID is over and done with, is the secret of you and the happiness you share with Dr. Jennifer Basdale Green, sir. Hats off to you both. And one day you will share that secret with us.
You really want to ask the man that?
I'll tell you a secret. Ron Robinson once said, my wife should be granted the OE. So I said, OE? He said, yes, the Order of Endurance.
Thank you, sir. And it's been a pleasure to have you, and our regards to the good doctor, sir. Have a good night.
Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. To our viewers and listeners out there, that was former Vice President, former Prime Minister, former Mayor, Hamilton Green. And ladies and gentlemen, it is important that we talk to these historical figures of Guyana. I want everybody to know something. Whether we have a political stake in the game or not, whether we like or dislike a Mr. Hamilton Green or a Mr. Barrett Jagdeo or a Mr. Grange or not, these men and women, they teach, they hold sway, and they continue to influence large cross-section of this country. And so it is interesting, Leonard, to hear Mr. Green's perspective. And he is quite lucid, he's quite clear, he's quite intelligent with regards to how he is able to answer the questions on the observers, for example.
Yes, I do. You know what is remarkable about Mr. Green? I've known him all over the years, and it is his memory. Very how you say it. It's a pleasure listening to him, and you don't have to agree with him, but he would tell you about 1970s or the particular date and so on.
But Leonard, you see, the thing is, you don't have to agree with him, and people don't have to agree with a Barrett Jagdeo or a David Granger. The truth is, the undeniable truth is, like or hate, these men and women in politics, they have following. They have people who listen to them. And so it's important that we as well look at their thing. Let's just cut right over and go to Commissioner Sase Gunraj. Sir, sorry to keep you waiting. And we are happy to have you once more. And all over to you, sir, for the latest in this long test innings.
Sorry. Good evening, Yog. Good evening, Leonard. And good evening to your viewers. I had to mute my microphone because I didn't want you to hear me chuckling at the history lesson you were getting in rigging, but that's another.
That is certainly another conversation. Well, it's good to have you on.
I think I'm getting a bad connection tonight as well. I'm not sure why. But Hamilton Green said a moment ago that Ron Robinson suggested that his other half should be given an OE, Order of Endurance. I think this country, every single citizen of this country, man, woman, and child, deserves an Order of Endurance when this election drama is done. But that being said, I've described this process as an ongoing and dynamic one. There's never a dull moment. You've seen the development this afternoon, which I have no doubt you might have spoken about earlier on in your program, in relation to the permission for the Carter Center to return. So I think I've touched on that on more than one occasions on this program. Suffice it to say, I think it's a retrograde step. The Carter Center has been involved in Guyana's elections since prior to 1992. We recall the sterling contributions made by the Carter Center to almost every one of our elections by providing technical support, by providing scrutiny, by doing all of these things. And to hear today that they have been denied entry by the COVID-19 task force. Uh, I've been describing a lot of things as unfortunate, but I'll leave it as unfortunate for now. In relation to that, and this, and I, in my post just an hour ago on Facebook, I have described the task force and I've used force in uplifted commas because that very poignant statement made by um, Prime Minister Motley about forces averse to the conclusion of our electoral process is always a very potent one for me. The COVID-19 task force has also failed to respond to the Guyana Elections Commission in relation to the increase in the number of workstations. And you'd recall that we've had a meeting yesterday where members of that task force visited the convention center and toured the facility along with members of the commission, the chairman, etc. And we identified several possible locations for the placement of new workstations. As we speak, I believe as late as about 4 this afternoon, my inquiry to the office of the chairman revealed that no communication was received. We committed to awaiting the response from them before actually activating the new stations. All of the equipment, the necessity for activating those stations are on the ground, waiting the guidance of the task force. None has been forthcoming. That being said, the nation as well, in the enduring process, is obviously concerned about the pace that at which we're going. And we have taken all of the steps necessary, or all of the steps that are available to us as a commission to ensure the process is speeded up. We have tried to make the process more efficient. We're trying to make maximum use of the hours that are available to us. And the other measure that we're contemplating, which will obviously have a positive impact on the duration of the process, is the increase in the number of workstations. And as we speak, we cannot get that. And like I said, that's unfortunate. We've done 58 boxes today. That's an increase in the numbers that we're going. And the one region that is complete is now region 1, because that singular box that they had an issue with it
Right.
being flooded has been it's been dried, the contents retrieved, and we were able to have that box counted. A statement of recount generated. Therefore, obviously that observation report might have made a very interesting observation report. Not that the other observation reports are not interesting. And allow me 1 second to say something about that and those observation reports. Obviously, this would make a very interesting observation report, and I'm happy to report that the SOR has been prepared and has been tabulated. That means the totality of Region 1's 99 boxes have been entered. That means that we will move to the next stage, at least for this district, in relation to the signing off, etc., of the results for that district. And then, of course, we'll have a discussion at the commission level on that. Speaking of observation reports, Yog, the observations and what comes under the rubric of observations is getting more ridiculous as the days progress. You would have, in fact, your previous guest, and I want to use that as the point of reference and no other one, although there are many other ones I can refer to which I can refer. Hamilton Green said earlier on that instances of persons who are dead having voted were raised with the commission or were raised during the process. I want to debunk that. As far as I am aware, with the as far as the death certificate, which was not even presented or collected by GECOM, what happened? They showed it. I also saw the other one that some immigration records were shown, but were and when challenged were pulled back. That was the same position that happened with the death certificate. So those instances, there has been no proof, and as we have it now, there are allegations and no proof that has been provided to the commission, to the process, and to GECOM officials.
Right.
I hope that's brief enough for the purposes this evening.
Thank you, sir. Just the number, total number of boxes so far.
50.
It would be about 460 or thereabouts.
Thank you. Well, Commissioner, thank you so very much. I'm sorry we have to rush off. We have come to our program time. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in room 592 as we say goodbye to you all, to Mr. Leonard Gildarie and Commissioner Sase Gunraj. Commissioner, thank you once again for seeing you. And ladies and gentlemen, please know that Monday we have an exciting In Focus on the Ecosystems of Guyana as our Monday night room 592. Follow Leonard Gildarie and yours truly on our Facebook page and you will see all the details. Have a good night. As we say, good night and have a good weekend. Sorry, I said happy. Have a great weekend. All the best wishes from Leonard Gildarie and yours truly from room 592. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Leonard. Thank you, Glenn Lau. Good night, everyone.
Okay.